Hello, 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 and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Jameelah, and I am a master manifester, and I'm sure you are too, because you're watching content like this. The name of this channel is Manifesting Magic the Practical Way, because there are a lot of practicalities to manifesting the lives we choose. As you can see, I have me a nice little pimple. I don't get pimples very much, but I sure have one today, right? Anyway, what I'm discussing today is attachments, right? So I was listening to some audio this morning, and it really provoked some thought in me, and it made me think about how clear and concise the message was through the audio that I was listening to. And it's the idea that anytime we show any level of attachment to something in our lives, that we are pretty much acting in our very base desires. We're pretty much acting in our very lowest version of ourselves, right? Because we're in essence saying to the universe that I am not whole and I am not complete as I am. I only feel that way because I'm attached to this job. I'm attached to having this much money. I'm attached to this relationship. I'm attached to this person. I'm attached to these outcomes, right? I'm attached to the idea of being a provider. I'm attached to the idea of being a homemaker, whatever it is. But anytime you are buried in anything that you are attaching to your identity, you are activating the lower version of yourself. And I think that's so important to remember, because while we can easily justify a lot of our behaviors, especially as it relates to what we are attached to, especially when it comes to our children and stuff like that, we still have to keep in mind that that is still a lower version of yourself. And somehow we've come to live in a world where we believe that attachment equals love, and we believe that attachment equals passion. We believe attachment equals purpose in some kind of way, but it really just doesn't, right? Especially if you're the kind of person that's attached to a really specific idea of how your life is supposed to be. So I find myself being a victim of that. Not a victim, but making myself a victim of it. But being a person that's had that. Whenever I see something happening in my life, I was telling my daughters this morning, when I see something that I don't like, there's a large part of me that's just like screaming. That's like, I don't want this life. I don't want to live like that. I do everything that I can because I don't want to be mediocre. I don't want to live mediocre. I don't want to be around mediocre people. That's one of my things, right? I'm always looking to be inspired into something greater all the time. That's just who I am. And I feel like everyone should be like that to some degree. I'm not attached to it though. But I was just thinking about how I have been exercising attachment to certain ideas and mindsets as it relates to many things in my environment that I just don't approve of because of my mindset and who I am. And it's not to say that my approval is the end all be all. I think that's the beauty of life. We get to pick and choose the things that we want and don't want, right? I was dropping my daughter off at school this morning, the younger one, and I looked at the children going in, and I was just like, I apologize. I thought I was going to have something better for you by now, right? It's like I did the homeschool thing, and that worked out perfectly and great, and it was a lot of years, and I felt like it was the best time because they're actually real whole people. Like, these middle school and high school is just a formality. These children are more mature mentally and emotionally than the vast majority of adults that I know. And I'm very proud of that to some degree, right? Because I feel like there's so many people that have children, and the children just hanging out with the parents. They don't learn anything and they don't get anything. And then the children go into the world and wonder why they can't create or develop themselves past where their parents were. And I just didn't want that for them. It looks like you can do more. But as she was getting out, she's so much bigger than that environment. It's like this. It's such. I'm like, man, it's like The Walking Dead, watching the children scurry into the schools like that, and like NPCs, Like, I said, I apologize. And she knew exactly what I was talking about. I said, I really thought I would have a better plan for you all before we got to this point. But children grow at the same time. When you're working on yourself and working on things, you don't always have the option to do the things that you want to do or wanted to do with them at a certain age, right? But she understood. She was just like, yeah, I get it, As she gets out the car and, her very individualized look and clothing and hair and mindset. So I'm thinking to myself, well, she's definitely not blending into the crowd, so she gets it. But at the same time, she really feels the pain of having to sit amongst people that are not at her level. And I felt the same thing as a kid. I didn't have an outlet for it. And so my outlet was to call everybody stupid. I didn't know that I was just far beyond the mindsets of the people that I was sitting around every single day. I was being dumbed down and shrunken in these environments, and I couldn't figure out, how come I can't enjoy this like everybody else seems to be, right? And if I was in trouble for anything else in school, it was because I was sassing the teacher, whatever that meant. Or I know exactly what it means. But it really was when a teacher said something and I thought it was wrong. And I'm like, well, actually, that's not true. If you do blah, blah. And they're like sassing me. And I'm like, wait, I'm right. Isn't that more important than your ego? No, it was not. And then they were bringing parents to the school. And then, you sit there and parents, a lot of them didn't know. And it's like, I was right. They were all stupid. And then they make fun of you. I've sat through this and it felt so shrunken. And so I was telling her, I apologize that I didn't have a better plan for you. But a part of me is also, too, remembering that I don't want to get attached to a really specific way that their lives and that their upbringing has to be, because you never know what people can experience. Maybe the fact that they are experiencing this regular thing for this little time being, that they'll have the mindset of like, I don't want to create that, like I want to do something more. I want to advance myself. And they already have that mindset. Maybe being too far out on the other end of the spectrum, they wouldn't have known the value in what we had when we were homeschooling and when they did have freedom and when we could move around without, worrying about being places at 8:30 and then picking up at 4 o'clock, and it's the rigmarole of the regular everyday life, right? Like we sat out of that for many, many, many years. And so I was thinking myself too, like, you have to remember that you can't be attached to how things get done. Like you have an intention for their lives. You have an intention for how you would like it to play out. You have an intention for like how you would like your workspace to be. You have an intention for how you would like your career to be. All these things. But when we get too attached to them, that's when we're operating in our lower, fearful self. That's when we're so caught up into we're not seeing what we want today. So we get anxious and we start to get paranoid and we start to feel like, oh my God, everything's not turning out like I wanted to be. My life is not turning out like I wanted to. These people around me are not the kind of people I wanted to be around. And we start to panic because we're way too attached to what we thought it was supposed to look like or what we thought the results were supposed to be at this particular time in our life and space, right? So just give you a little something to think about, whenever we are overly attached to an idea or a concept or a mind. And the example that the man was using that I was listening to was marriage, and how in this world we attribute so much to people in years. That's why I don't really, it doesn't really matter to me, right? Like longevity as a person is more important to me than like saying I've been in a relationship for 10 years. It's like that means nothing to me. And so many people care. It's like I think I might be in a relationship now for about 3 years, and I was trying to care, but I really just didn't, because if I'm not growing, then a relationship is just as good as standing still, right? But the fact that I am growing is more important to me than tagging some numbers on how many years I've been with someone. And I think that's a real ingrained mindset that we're really attached to in the society, that somehow someone saying 20 years is more important than someone saying 20 years of growth, even if they were single and growing, right? And I think that the minute we start breaking down these attachments that we have in these other places, we allow ourselves freedom. We get freedom to grow. We get freedom to see the possibilities that our minds couldn't see, to see the possibilities that are available that we just have not realized were available to us, right? So anyway, I don't want to ramble on and on about that though, but the relationship one is a big one, because, he was making a joke saying, people are like, oh, you've been together 25 years. What's your secret? And he was like, we agree on things. And that's kind of true with a lot of people. You just get watered down so much to where you just latch on to each other for dear life and find yourself in agreement for things that you may have not even wanted in your life. That's why I'm a firm believer that as adults, like after you have children and they're grown, and say you did the first marriage thing to keep the children, there's different phases of your life. And you weren't able to create that and you wound up raising the children separately, divorced and all that. After that, I think it's perfectly okay for adults to live separately and have two different agendas happening. So if we happen to be in the same space and we're both growing, then that's all cool and dandy. But the possessiveness is the hard part for so many people, because it's such a deep attachment to a relationship has to be this way. A relationship has to play out this way, right? And it just makes us so fearful and anxious and small, and we never really are growing as expansive as we should be, because there's a part of us that's hanging on for dear life to this idea that we have of what a relationship is, right? Anyway, I can go on and on about that, right? I wrote about that in my book, Low Places. I was like, I will no longer value anything that somebody just said. We've been married for 25 years. That's great. And like, that means nothing. Like, what have you been doing? Who are you? Have you developed and grown? Have you expanded? Is everyone happy? Are we all disease riddled because everybody's not living out their dreams? And we're eating together to death. You know what I mean? And we're barely sleeping in the same room and all that kind of stuff. It's like, there's more to everything. And so if you're growing, that's wonderful, fine and great. But those years really are nothing. You can be with someone for 6 months and grow more than you were with somebody that you were attached to for 20 years, right? Anyway, I can go on and on about that, right? Have a wonderful, wonderful day.